everyone, this is Idol Kitayamanta from BSA Ed, major in Social Studies, Section D. For today's video, I'm going to report Unit 1 Learner-Centered Teaching, Foundations and Characteristics, under the topic of Dimensions of Learner-Centered Teaching, the responsibility for learning, the purpose and process of assessment, and the balance of power. But before we go further in our discussion, let me first give you the objectives. Our objectives is the student will be able to know their responsibility for learning, gather reliable information, student will be able to describe the process and provide example of its application. The responsibility for learning. Responsibility is just only one word, but it can be defined as a whole. The responsibility for learning. The proposal is not about abandoning structures, rules, or extrinsic motivation, but it is about understanding the liabilities that approaches involve in using them. With these approaches, they work to build spaces in which students can begin to move, work, grow, mature, and act responsibly about their own learning towards others. So this means that students are not just acting as a students, because in the stage they begin to move, grow, be mature enough in the words and actions, and they move responsibly equipped on their own learnings towards the learning to others. Getting students to accept the responsibility for learning. When teaching is learner-centered, the classroom climate changes in ways that accomplish these two objectives. First is faculty aim to create a climate conducive to learning. Second, faculty aim to create environments where without rules and requirements. There are climate changes that will uphold for learning so that we can have a better classroom and a good learning command. Classroom climates conducive to learning. Conducive means making a certain situation or outcome likely or possible. So in classroom climate conducive to learning, classroom environments affect behavior, including the motivation to learn and the willingness to accept responsibility for learning. The faculty must have an educator that have the willingness to accept the differences of every student. There must be a teacher who can be able to teach well and understand the differences or understand of the student on having difficulties. Not just the classroom must be a friendly and one, but it must also be to be a teacher. Climates that build student autonomy and responsibility. A self-regulated student proactively seeks out information when needed and takes steps to master it. So in this climate changes, it allows students to be more active to seek information and be in a right position, a right condition to have an information and get some step to master things. There are 3 principles to create conditions that motivate students to begin accepting responsibility for the various aspects of their learning. Principle 1, it's about who is responsible for what in the teaching learning process. Masters should have the responsibility to monitor the process and offer constructive feedback and assessment. So the question is, who is responsible in the teaching learning process? Yes, students are responsible, parents are responsible to their children in learning, but ultimately, it all begins in the teacher. The teacher should give or create conditions and develop policies and practices that students enable to understand the responsibility and that empower them to accept it. Principle 2 is about logical consequences, not discipline. This principle is about connecting students' decisions to and with results. Our role is to help them see the connections so that they can learn from them. So in this principle, the students able to help the students see the connections from their decisions and that their decision must have a good results or or whatever would be the result of their decision is they can learn and they can motivate themselves to make decisions with a good result. Principle 3. It's about consistency in word and deed. When teachers are expecting more responsible learners, this should be conveyed not by what they say, but by what they do. So in this principle, we can insert the sayings, actions speak louder than words. We can easily trust the actions, but words, we cannot easily trust words because there's a big possibility that words are just words. But when you see the actions of what he do, we can trust easily on it because we see and we witness what a particular person do, or he or she have the willingness to do that, to do such thing. So at this moment, we will proceed to the policies and practices that create climates for learning. So teachers need policies that create positive impact on learning outcomes. Encourage students to take actions necessary. These are the policies and practices that teacher must need. So at this moment, we will proceed to the process of assessment. The first one is assessment for learning, where is formative. The purpose of formative assessment is to provide students with feedback on how they are ongoing. The aim is to help students improve their performance and make their next piece of assessed work to better. So in this case, the feedback of students may receive is the key component of formative assessment. So from all the above, all the lessons that been tackled, the students will be able to have a formative assessment where they can put their feedback on the discussion of what they have learned throughout the lesson. So feedback is intended to help them identify weakness and build strength to improve the quality of their next piece of assessment. So ang formative assessment also is where they can identify where they are weakness on that lesson and where they are strength on that lesson, so that they can improve their skills on that weaknesses and more improve on how to build their strength on that particular lesson. So the second assessment is assessment certification, where is summative. Another key purpose of assessment is to gather evidence to make a judgment about the student's level of performance against the specified learning objectives. So summative is very familiar to us, right? This is the exam, what we call an exam throughout the lessons that we've discussed, right? So in this case, we are able to determine the students' level performance on what they have learned and what they have been put in their mind about this exam or about the lesson that will been tackled. The third one is protect academic standards. Grades from cumulative assessments are used to certify that a person has the necessary knowledge and skills to be awarded as a qualification. So when we say cumulative assessments, this is where an exam for all the lessons that we've tackled, like for the first quarter, you've been tackled it in about 2 months or 3 months. So overall for that discussion, you have your cumulative assessments, whereas that we call the final exam. Then from that cumulative assessments, from that grade, it is that certified that when we choose person who is more qualified to be an awarded. So the fourth one is the feedback for teaching. The result from both formative and summative assessment can help you track how your students are going throughout your courses. Closer looking at the result can help you identify any patterns of difficulties or understanding students might have. So in this fourth process of assessment is where the teacher could give feedback on how his or her students react on the whole lesson that she've discussed or have discussed. So from formative and summative assessments, it can help a teacher to track if his or her student have difficulty in that part, or have something did not understand in that part. So that this means in this process, it enables and given the chance to recall or give some comments on the lesson that has been discussed. So we will proceed to the 4 steps of assessment cycle. So the step 1 is clearly define and identify the learning outcomes. Each program should formulate between 3 and 5 learning outcomes that describe what students should be able to do or to know and to appreciate following completion of the program. So in making an assessment, you must clearly define what would be your questions, what would be the content of your assessment, so that you can able to identify the learning outcomes that all in all your discussions there must be an assessment that is related to it, so that the students would be able to know and have knowledge in taking the assessment. So the second step is select appropriate assessment measures and assess the learning outcomes. Multiple ways of assessing the learning outcomes are usually selected and used. Although direct and indirect measures of learning can be used, it is usually recommended to focus on direct measures of learning. So in this step, select appropriate assessment. So you are a teacher, so you must select the most appropriate assessment or the most appropriate discussion that you will include in that assessment, so that you have a good learning outcomes from your students. Step 3 is where analyze the result of the outcomes assessed. It is important to analyze and report the result of the assessment in a meaningful way. So in this case, in step 3, analyze the results of the outcomes assessed. This is where I told you a while ago that you must choose an appropriate topics or appropriate discussion, the discussion of an assessment, and it is clearly defined and identified for learning outcomes, so that you can analyze and have a good results, and so that you can report it easily and meaningfully. The 4th step is adjust or improve programs following the results of the learning outcomes assessed. Assessment results are worthless if they are not used. This step is critical step of the assessment process. The assessment process has failed if the results do not lead to the adjustments or improvements in programs. The results of assessments should be disseminated widely to faculty in the department in order to seek their input on how improve programs from the assessment results. So in this step, 4th step is you adjust or improve programs following the results. If you are not using the step 1, step 2, and step 3, it is not easy for you to adjust or improve the result of the assessment because of the students could not be able to answer or direct answer the assessment because it is not related on the discussion, and it is not appropriate for assessment, and this will lead to don't have a good result in your assessment, so that there's no improvements or adjustment on it. And you must, in every result of the assessment, you must report it on the faculty. And if you will go and report in the faculty with a low scores of the assessment, it will affect your teaching skills because you will not be able to give the appropriate assessment to your students. So at this moment, we'll proceed to the balance of power. Balance of power. According to the theories of radical and feminist pedagogy and researchers related to regulated learners. Students' motivation, confidence, and enthusiasm for learning. Teachers control the process through and by which they learn. So, balance of power. It comes from the students' motivation, how positive the students is, how the teacher handles students, and how they share their power to their students, and how the students shared power to their teachers. How the balance of power changes. In order to achieve balance in power, we have to understand the rule of the power in classrooms. So in order for us to fully understand or achieve the great balance of power, we must look surrounds in classroom so that we are able to be knowledgeable enough and able to understand what is the main role of all the things inside the classroom. We have to create learner-centered environment. Students should have a positive impact on learning process. So in this how the balance of power changes. If we have that balance of power, that's why we are creating a friendly environment, a friendly classroom for all the students to be able to learn and be more progressive enough in learning, because they have some positive impact or positive attitudes towards how they learn from that particular discussion, because we are giving them the good environment for them to study. The next one is power is shared. When teaching is learner-centered, power is shared rather than transfer wholesale. So, power shared. When we say shared, it is shareable. So, when a teacher able to share her power about teaching, that's what a student may learn, and it is not be able to transfer the knowledge from them, but you are sharing your power to them for them to be able to understand and learn from your discussion. Faculty and schools still make a decision about learning, but they no longer make all decisions, and not always without student input. So faculty and school are being combined to have a key decisions, but they could not make key decisions without an input of a student. So it is very important for this faculty, school, and students and teachers should have to share their power so that they have a good decision to make. There are some of objections on power sharing idea. They assume that students end up running the class and teaching themselves. Students leave the teacher with no viable role in the educational process. This philosophy ultimately dispenses with the teacher. The goal is to equip students with learning skills so sophisticated that they can learn or teach themselves. Power sharing, there is also a benefits of power sharing. Power sharing has wonderful effects on three elements of educational process, which are learners to students, teachers, the environment, and the classroom. For learners, they begin to exercise their power tentatively and anxiously, so they need feedback and reinforcement to move forward with more confidence. So, from this, for learners, for like power sharing for learners, they were able to build their confidence more, and they able to showcase what they have or what they got being a student because of that power sharing. They will be engaged, involved, connected with course, and they are motivated to work harder. Because of that power sharing, students are being inspired and being motivated to work hard, to strive hard to achieve what they want to be. They can able to apply the content to their own communication as they understand themselves as communicators and see communication happening all around them. So power sharing also, they are learning also on how to communicate with others, on how to share information to others on what they have learned, and what would be the happening around in them. For teachers also, we have power sharing for teachers. The benefits also is they no longer struggle with passive, interested and disconnected students. So in this means if they have power sharing, the teachers will not be hardly understand his or her students anymore because they're already sharing all their powers, and both of them are able to understand each other because they are as much as connected as now. And the last one is for the environment. The benefits of the for power sharing in environments is there is much stronger sense that the class belongs to everyone. So if they have both having power sharing, the environment is have a positive vibes, a good vibes, a feel comfortable for everyone. For example, when something is ineffective, students are much more willing than in past to fix it. So, if there is some of us are ineffective in class, but we have the power sharing, right? So, we're able to fix on that ineffective attitude. Hi, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something about what I've been discussed this day. And again, this is Idol Kitayamanta from BSE Ed, major in Social Studies Section D, reporting.